Hello everybody. I thought I might do a little video, tell you a little bit about myself, why I'm doing this, who I am. So this is just going to be a little bit of a historical story. So I was born in 1963 in Boston, Massachusetts. I had a professional father and an artist mother. My father worked he was a nuclear physicist, worked for public health department. At that point, that was a military kind of thing. My mother was an artist. She did graphic design at the time, really worked from home and raised kids. Things were pretty normal for the first few years of my life. When I was 4, there was an incident, quite a significant incident in my life. I had an older brother who was born about a year and 9 months ahead of me, and a younger sister that was born when I was 4. And it was around the time she was born that this medical event happened in the family, which I'll get into later. But soon after this, a number of things happened. I had had this medical event, and then it was followed by a traumatic injury when I fell from a fairly significant height onto my head and compacted the vertebra in my neck. It really wasn't understood at the time. I was only 5, maybe 6. Those kind of things really weren't understood very well, so nothing was done about it, and it led to issues later. That all feeds into the kind of medical story that follows along. But aside from that, I was a really intelligent kid. This thing that happened to me when I was 4 created a dramatic change in my personality and everything. And I became a very very cerebral for a little girl. I didn't really trust or believe any adults by this time, and I really analyzed and thought about things and worked from my own intuition even as a real little kid. But it was problematic because obviously that can look like defiance when you have adults that are trying to get you to do things that aren't good, and you won't do it because you've sussed out something's not right. But you don't really have the words or the understanding to explain it. So it just kind of looks like defiance. So there were a lot of issues that created for me. But the most essential thing that happened, I think, that feeds into why I am the way that I am and how I came to this walk, aside from the medical issues which led me into it, probably had to do with a decision that my birth parents made that was maybe not the best decision. They started swinging, and they met another couple, and they sort of swapped partners, like permanently. And to make things more confusing, as a kid, they had a couple of kids, so there were 3 in my family and 2 in that other family. And those kids really got specialized treatment. Their parents were both very intellectual, also pretty well off, British, both of them were British, and they just had a very different take on things. And so they were very protective of their own kids, but pretty insensitive to the 3 of us. But for some reason, these 2 barely compatible couples decided to buy a house together and move everybody into it, all the kids and them, and moved from Massachusetts down to Maryland, where both my father and this other gentleman who eventually became my stepfather worked around the DC area. It was a big old Victorian hotel that had been converted to a home, a 3-story, beautiful mansard roof structure. But it was not the domestic situation was pretty bad. You can imagine. They didn't get along. We didn't get along. The saving grace was that the property was on about 9 acres of highly developed and landscaped property, because this was one of those hotels that had been on the route from Florida to New York, you know. So although it was a small hotel, it was a very prime hotel. So there was lots of landscaping, lots of fruit trees, lots of permaculture. And as kids, we basically lived out there from the time the weather warmed up until it was time to come in at the end of the summer. And you could just graze on all the fruit that was growing out there all year long at different times. You know, berries, plums, apples, pears, cherries, gooseberries, strawberry. There was just everything. Really, really beautiful property. That ended badly, as one might expect, with police and the whole bit. My father and my stepfather got into a big fight. As a result, there was a cat killed in a pretty horrendous outburst of rage. I had at that point a German Shepherd. It was really the saving grace for me, because as a thinking little girl in what is now the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, I really thought I could and should be able to do anything. And so I was always trying to do everything my older brother did and not being allowed. And it was a very frustrating situation, because in a lot of ways, intellectually, my level of logic and math and understanding and language comprehension was so much further ahead. But I was really shut down from the opportunities that I wanted to follow, that I felt led to follow with my intellect, which was very hard for me. And in fact, by the time I reached 11, the whole family dynamic had shifted. All 5 of us were living with my mother and the stepfather. They took my dog in the middle of the day when I was at school and had him put to sleep, which was absolutely devastated me. It was the last straw from a life of humiliation, degradation, minimalization. It was the absolute last straw for me. I was 11, and I was very quickly doing anything and everything that I could possibly get my hands on. Smoking cigarettes, smoking pot, drinking alcohol, having sex, doing all of it in any attempt at all to find anybody anywhere that actually gave a flying flip about me. I still got straight A's. I was still able to handle school in spite of all of that. But it got me into doing some things very young in life before I had matured that really affected everything about the rest of my development. And not having the family support to make things work, I ended up going down a pretty long, difficult road with a lot of pain and a lot of injuries and no financial security of any sort. I don't think I ever had financial security in my life. And you just kind of learn to live without financial security and just get to be okay anyway, even though there's no one who really appreciates your talent or wants to help you, it's just whatever. I did a lot of work, did a lot of different things, always gave them everything I had, and that's just how it is. So that's how I got through to the point where I could finally sort of retire, which is where I am now, and I'm sort of out of the whole mess now, because it turns out American culture doesn't appreciate intellectual women very much, and even less so intellectual women who refuse to get married, who refuse to go along with dualistic stuff just because everyone else is. And people don't like that. People don't like to be challenged, but I still made it through. I got to where I am, and as a matter of fact, because of the injuries that I had and that were complicated when I was 29 with a pregnancy-related physical injury, I finally got to do a lot of things and follow my own intuition to native knowledge and ceremony, and to walk this red road. So that's kind of how I got here. I'll do another video after this, telling you a little bit about that event that happened when I was 4 and why I go under Adhpa on this channel, where that name came from, what the story is, what I think is going on. I will add in this video that all through my life experience from the time I was 4, I had dreams that showed me things that were going to happen or directed me to solutions and inspirations, or provided information, or in some cases even what we would call a medicine dream, receiving of a certain kind of medicine, which then I was able to use in my life as an energy. It's an energy tool. We'll say it that way. It's just an energy tool. So dreaming was always part of my experience, and I very early had dreams that came true exactly as I had them in the dream. So it was made very clear to me that these dreams were more than just some sort of fantasy made up in my head, that there was some real information transfer going on. And so I learned from that also very quickly not to be afraid of these things. I had terrifying nightmares as a child because of the abuse that I did go through. But I came through that to understand that these kind of visions and things are survivable, right? If you go into fear in them, you can actually hurt yourself. But if you can accept them as a communication, as information, and not let your emotions stir up all your autonomic reactions, you can obviously get a lot of information and you will survive them. And that helped me very effectively when I started experimenting with LSD and other things at a very young age, at 11, as I said. By the time I was 13, I'm sure I had dropped my first acid, maybe before. But I never worried about it making me lose my mind. I always knew whatever I experienced on those things was just a distortion in my perception, and that I could experience it and learn from it, and I would come through it. I didn't have to act on it. And that really, I think, kept me from going into heavy drugs like heroin or other things that might have led me to a destructive path on those things. It also helped me when I was dealing with my pain not to go to opiates, but to be able to separate from my bodily pain in meditation and work with the energies. And eventually I got healing, and that's why I'm doing this channel. And in fact, while I've been doing this channel, I experienced a second miraculous sudden healing of a disc deterioration issue, bulging disc issue that I've had since I fell off a truck some 7 years ago. And that just occurred as a process of doing this walk. All right, so that's a little bit about my story. I'm not going to bring in my family names or any names or talk about any of that. Most of these people are still alive. There have been difficult relationships, but we've healed them. We've worked through it. So, I don't carry any anger or frustration or anything at the people's decisions, poor decisions that were made. Everybody works from where they are at. And we have come through this as a family with an increased awareness and knowledge and a love for each other. So that's a really incredible thing. All right, so I'll see if I can get this popped up here pretty quick, and then I'll follow up with another one on that for what happened, the medical story. We'll call it Adhpa's medical history. All right. Love you guys. Hope you like this. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let's engage.